What happens when one of South Korea's most respected broadcast institutions publicly acknowledges a Filipino idol group with clear and deliberate praise? Not casually, not politely, but in a way that signals institutional recognition. Here today on Global Discovery, we're going to unpack why moments like this matter more than they first appear. Because in Korean media culture, public praise at that level is rarely accidental. This wasn't a fan gathering or a variety show appearance. This was delivered in a formal setting where every word is measured and intentional. And here on Global Discovery, we always look beyond the surface. We don't just react to headlines, we examine what they signal. Organizations like KBS World are not just entertainment channels. They represent the international broadcasting arm of the Korean broadcasting system, one of the most influential media institutions in South Korea. KBS World plays a major role in exporting Korean culture globally. It helps shape what international audiences recognize as quality Asian entertainment. So when representatives from that institution speak during official cultural platforms, such as the Round Festival, it carries institutional weight. It reflects perspective, not impulse. When SB19 was acknowledged in that context, the framing became important. The tone became even more important. The praise was not positioned as encouragement for a rising act. It was delivered as recognition for a group already operating at a high level. Here on Global Discovery, we pay attention to language, because being described as promising is very different from being described as proven. There was emphasis on discipline and professionalism. There was recognition of global stage presence and strong artistic identity. Korean media systems are built on rigorous training and performance standards. Respect is typically reserved for artists who demonstrate structure and sustainability. SB19's trajectory stands out because they trained under a Korean-influenced system but evolved into something independent. Over time, they developed creative control and strategic direction. They are not simply performers executing choreography. They are involved in writing, producing, conceptual planning, and long-term branding. That level of involvement aligns with what Korean industry executives value. Self-management combined with performance excellence signals durability. Another factor that often gets overlooked, and we talk about this often on Global Discovery, is identity clarity. SB19 presents Filipino culture confidently on international stages without dilution. That confidence reads as authenticity rather than imitation. And authenticity carries strong weight in industries built on national identity. For decades, Asian pop influence flowed outward, primarily from Korea and Japan. The infrastructure and global export systems were largely centralized, but the ecosystem is evolving. Influence is becoming more multidirectional. Recognition of a Filipino group within a Korean institutional space reflects that shift. It suggests that excellence is no longer geographically confined. This isn't about replacing K-pop. And here on Global Discovery, we're not framing it as competition. It's about expansion. It's about a broader ecosystem forming across Asia. When major Korean broadcasters acknowledge excellence beyond their borders, it signals adaptation. It shows that the regional conversation is widening. Moments like this are subtle. They don't explode overnight, but they quietly recalibrate perception. Once an artist is publicly recognized within institutional spaces, media framing begins to shift. Coverage moves from curiosity to credibility. That shift influences future invitations and collaborations. It changes how producers, sponsors, and global platforms evaluate long-term value. It also impacts how audiences interpret performances. A group framed as leaders will be watched differently than a group framed as newcomers. And here on Global Discovery, that's the part we find most interesting. Because perception often shapes opportunity. SB19 did not reach this point through one viral moment. Their position has been built through consistent releases, touring, and strategic expansion. They cultivated both strong domestic support and international visibility. Over time, that consistency made them difficult to overlook. Korean media rarely highlights foreign groups without sustained performance metrics. Recognition tends to follow long-term presence rather than short-term trends. That is why this feels less like a compliment and more like confirmation. It suggests the industry sees structural permanence. Asian pop is entering a phase where collaboration is becoming more visible than hierarchy. Markets are interacting rather than operating in isolation. Filipino pop, Thai pop, and other Southeast Asian movements are gaining clearer global definition. Infrastructure is improving, and audiences are diversifying. Within that landscape, SB19 has become one of the most visible representatives of Filipino pop internationally. Their visibility naturally places them in cross-border discussions. Institutional praise does not manufacture credibility. It reflects credibility that has already been built. And as we often say here on Global Discovery, the most significant industry shifts don't always arrive loudly. Sometimes they arrive in carefully chosen sentences. Years from now, this moment may be referenced as a marker, not because it was dramatic, but because it was official. When institutions speak, they archive their perspective, and archived recognition becomes part of industry history. The broader implication isn't about validation, it's about regional evolution. Asian pop is no longer a single-center narrative. It is becoming a network of interconnected creative hubs. SB19's inclusion in that conversation highlights that transformation. It shows that discipline, identity, and consistency can transcend origin. The question now isn't whether they belong on global stages. The real question is how this acknowledgement shapes the next phase. Because once perception shifts at the institutional level, the trajectory tends to expand rather than contract. And that expansion means new stages, new partnerships, and new standards across the region. Here on Global Discovery, we'll continue watching how this unfolds. Because this isn't just about one group, it's about the future direction of Asian pop. And sometimes, the biggest shifts begin quietly.